All right. So we're going to work with Live Paint and the Live Paint tool to create out of our grid to start building shapes using a non-destructive way to kind of determine what we want to how we want to find shapes out of this like complicated shape. And so I'm kind of going with a pretty complicated grid here, and I would recommend you do the same, is choose something that's fairly complicated so that we can kind of really see the different opportunities. There's lots of different shapes we can make depending on how we combine lines. So we're going to start by selecting the whole grid. So here I am, I've selected my whole grid, and I'm going to press K to bring in the Live Paint tool. Now I'm going to select my color group so that I'm picking the color group I want. I'm going to hit enter to bring up my options. Okay, so I want to first bring up my options so we can kind of get this set up the way we want. We're going to check paint fills, so we want that checked. We want the cursor swatch preview, and we want the highlight checked. Those are the three we want checked: paint fills, cursor swatch preview, and highlight. We want all three of those checked. We want to make sure we've unchecked paint strokes. We want to make sure that's unchecked. We want to keep the width to 4 pixels, which is the default, or you can make it smaller if you want. And we want to choose a highlight color that highlight to a color in which we'll see all of our designs in. So it's right now in a light red. So I'm going to leave it at light red. And we're going to say okay. So once we have everything we want. Okay. So now I can say okay. Now you can see there's a little color, 3 little square color palettes showing. I can use my arrow keys left and right to go through the colors. And you can see on the right here, it's going through the colors of my swatch. And it's going through the colors. I'm going to actually click on the color group I want it to go on. And now it's in my color group that I just made. So here's, you can see it's just going through my color group. So I can choose colors within my color group. So I'm going to start with, and it'll be the center one that it's, oops, I'm clicking on my color group. There we go. Come on. There, I'm in my color group. So we have our slide, we've selected our Live Paint group. And we're now going to look through our design. Everything is selected. And so now I can decide what I want to, or what are the combinations I want to make. Let me move all of these windows so I can kind of see better what I'm doing. So I might decide that I want to focus on these kind of petal shapes that are appearing here and here. Kind of, in other words, not really focus on the circles, but kind of these petal shapes that are happening. And I'm just drawing right through, clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging. These are all staying separate pieces right now. Nothing is being merged. So it's just right now keeping the grid lines and allowing me to look at the separate pieces. So I can say, okay, maybe I want to have those shapes going there. And then I can decide maybe on this side, I want to focus on on these shapes, but then you can see it gets real tight in here. Let me zoom in. So that I can really get in and color these tighter areas. Oops, that's not what I want. I want this and this, right? So I can kind of decide, okay, now here on these areas, I'm going to do this. Zoom in. And it's also letting me see that, you know, there's some problems in my grid that aren't aligning, which I'm not loving. So I'm like, I might even want to go back in and adjust this grid before I go to final, but I might just use this right now because I want them all to look like this one. See how this one is perfectly aligning with my grid? This one is not. So, you know, I might think about, what do I want to do here? Like fixing the grid ultimately. For the moment, I'm just using it so I can kind of decide how might I want to color this. And I'm just hitting undo when it grabs a part that I don't want, because remember, it's non-destructive, it's not permanently changing it. So you can kind of get the idea of how I can start looking at creating shapes. And then I might also say, okay, I don't want to keep everything in this pink. Maybe I want to do, I want to use some of my other colors in my palette. So I'm going to switch to the blue. Let's see. I want the orange actually. Maybe I want to show this kind of layering feel with these shapes. And then maybe I'm going to switch my colors again and explore this. So you see, you can start to kind of really think about how you might start exploring the design that you want to create. Maybe over here, I want to make this shape. So I want you guys to try this on one of your designs right now and take and explore, you know, what it is that you're designing. So I'm realizing, oh, I'm missing I need another oval up here to kind of complete this, to come back and add one. So that's fine. I can undo, unselect, deselect, grab this. I see a hands raised. Yeah, go ahead, Nakia.
I'm not able to select my color group. Even when I select on it, it still shows all the swatches.
Well, it will show all the swatches, but you want to choose it. So when you hit K, so let me select again. Hold on. Let me select all. So when I'm going to hit K, which is my paint tool. And so you're clicking on the actual folder. You put, are you clicking on the folder itself?
Yeah, yes, I did. But it still shows the other swatches.
Let me have you share your screen. Hold on, let me fix it so you can share your screen. Okay, so we're going to assume that we have finished our live paint and that we are now going to save it. So when we're finishing, we're going to go over here to our group, our layers group. select everything here. Oh, I locked it. That's what's wrong. Forgot I locked it. Okay, so now I'm back here in my live paint. I can pull down the layer and I can see I have a live paint group. What it's doing is it's making a live paint group for me as I'm designing. So I'm going to select my live paint group and it's called live paint. And once we decided this is it, we're done. This is the way we want it. This is the finished design we like and we want to go with. I'm going to go up here to the object menu and go to live paint and go to expand. Once I do that, you can see over here, it now no longer says live paint, it says group. And you can see that it's all selected as a group, but we're probably going to want to do some other edits to this and make some changes along the way. So you can go up here to the grouping or to the group here and select the group and go up to object and go ungroup. And now when you have it ungrouped, you can see you can access every piece of it and all the little parts, okay? And the reason we want to do that is because we're now going to decide what pieces we want to edit or make into actual units. They're all individually, and you want them individual ultimately in the end, so we can kind of adjust. So some of the things we can also, so then we can take decisions and decide how do we want to take specific shapes and group them. So right now I'm gonna, I deselected them all. I can select all of them as a group right here. And kind of work with them. So that's once you have it finalized. All right, we'll come back to this in a little bit about next steps. I wanted to just kind of give you that. I'm going to talk about some other edits we can make on shapes. So live paint is one. Another thing we have the ability to do is take, so those of us who have used, and I started incorporating shapes into our grids, there's a lot of edits we can make to customize these shapes and build them within the grids as well. So for example, here is a square, a polygon, and a circle that I've laid on this square grid. So the live shape properties are something that we have available to us. Let me turn off. There we go. Get into the right. Oh, there I am on the right layer. Okay. So let me move this down and zoom this up. So we're in the live shape properties. Here we go. And I'm just moving these so I can have them in front of me. Okay. So when I select my square, you can see this transform. I'm opening up the transform panel. And you can adjust these, the corners, edges, and make some changes within this transform panel. And I want to make sure you're aware of that. There's a lot of choices we can make that you might not have considered to customize your shapes within. We don't have to use a square with sharp 90-degree corners like they currently come out. When you click this little button next to in the transform panel, next to each of the 4 corners, you can see that you can choose corner types. Now, when you have the link, that means all 4 corners are going to change together. So I'm going to choose, for example, first I got to make I'm going to make like a 50 pixel radius. So I'm just going to start with the curve, and you can see all 4 corners are curving. And here in my design, you can see that the corners are curving. Now, that's something you probably have used before. You know, you can manually do that too by just grabbing these little slider balls here. So that's another way you can do it. And the nice thing about the slider is you can kind of align it into your grid. So line it up on that square grid. So I'm like, okay, I like that. But I also can choose different kinds of corners. I can choose my corner to go concave on just one corner. Notice how I can change just this top corner, but the others stay convex. Or I can make them all do that. I can click concave for each one of them. Okay, another choice I can make is a flat edge. So I can say, I want to have a flat corner. Maybe on 2 sides and then concave. So I mean, you can do each corner something different if you want. So that's kind of a fun tool to be aware of. Of course, here you can change how much of that curve is numerically, or again, still by the slider. So I can now make all 4 of these using the slider change at the same rate. So I can bring them in as tight as I want or bring them out as far as I want. So that's kind of a nice feature. I can also play with the scale of the whole thing. So right now it's 800 by 800 pixels. Let's say I wanted to go the full size of my artboard, which is 1200 by 1200, right? Which obviously wouldn't make sense because it goes off, but you get the idea. Or I can go down to 600 by 600 and make it smaller. So I can adjust it there as well. I don't have to manually move it. I'm going to go back to 800 by 800, which is what it was. Okay, so the same is true for each of the shapes. I'm going to go with the polygon, which I've got as a 3-sided square. And the nice thing about the polygon in the transform panel is I can adjust how many sides right here numerically. And I can also choose the rotation. I can rotate it, you know, whichever direction I want. I can also play with the corners. I have those same corner tools as I had in the square, so I can round it or add a flat corner as well. Make it concave. I can do all of those corner treatments here as well, which is kind of nice to be aware of. And I can adjust the side length. So scale it. So that's all available to me in the transform panel. And let's go to this circle, the ellipse. I can do some interesting things here. Here, the thing that the ellipse allows me to do is I can actually make a pie in the ellipse. So I can make it 45-degree pie. And you see how it's cut out 45 degrees. I can adjust the rotation of it. Outside, I can make it just a slice, or I can make it a slice out of the pie. You can play with how much of the pie, and then you can play with rotating the pie. So that can be nice, depending on the shape you want to go after. And you can also still manually move it if you want. You don't have to use this, but those are options. So those are the different transform tools that allow you to customize those shapes within your designs even further, and allows you to kind of, or add shapes to your design. So if you have a very simple grid, you might want to think about bringing in some shapes to build upon your design that can add a lot of interest. Any questions? I'm going to pause here for a minute. Is everyone have you used these transform tools a lot? Have we used them before? Are these new? Oh, I see the chat. Couple messages. Okay, good. New stuff. All right, good. So try that out. Take a minute, and I'd like you guys to grab a couple shapes and let's explore using those transform tools. And or if you go through one of your grid designs that has shapes in it, go through and explore how you can maybe edit those shapes and bring in some custom elements, rounded corners, concave, convex, some of those elements into the design. Again. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is transforming. We're going to be looking at creating grids with rotational repetition of elements. So we're going to go ahead and look at creating a circle. And I've just created a circle holding my shift key down and the ellipse tool. And now I'm going to decide that I want to go ahead and repeat it and make a repeating element. So rather than, you know, copying and moving and transforming using transform, which is how I used to do it, there's a new tool in Illustrator that makes this so easy. And it's called the repeat tool. It's under object and it's called the repeat tool. And there's three choices. There's radial, grid, and mirror. I'm going to start with radial. So if I click it, it's automatically going to do whatever was the last thing it was done or what is the default. So I'm going to undo and I'm going to go to object, repeat options. And in those options, I can set it up where I can choose for the radial. I want 8 copies, 9 copies. How many copies of this shape do I want? I can also choose a radius. I can also address overlap. I'm just going to start with 8. And so then I'm going to go object, repeat, radial, and it's going to automatically create a radius and create 8. And the reason I did it that way, because I wanted to show you the thing that I like, because I'm such a visual person and I'm designing, I like to kind of see what it's doing. I love this new feature where they have this little slider, which is showing me, okay, here's the 8 I asked for, but if I zoom it up the slider, I can see 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, I can keep going like a spiral graph. I loved spiral graph when I was a kid. Oh my gosh, I just love this tool. So, right, so it's like spiral graph. If those of you who have ever used a spiral graph, this is the Illustrator spiral graph. All right, so I'm going to go something a little less complicated. I'm going to do 10. And then on the bottom, I can also address oh, I see that, the positive and the negative of it. So taking them away, adding them. So I can do partial. If I don't want them going all the way around the circle, let's say you only want a half a circle. That's how you do it. The second slider. Okay, very cool. I can also use my selection tool, grab the corner, hold my shift key down and scale this whole thing. Scale it up anywhere where I'm holding my shift key down. Actually, I don't think you have to. Nope, you don't have to hold the shift key down. It's not going to change. So I'm moving it around, getting it to where I want it. Let me grab this guy again. And I'm going to put it, I'm going to align it to my grid. There we go. I've aligned it. And I can now still change it. I don't have to stay. I mean, it's still changeable. So isn't that awesome? So once I get it where I want it, so let's say I've decided to go, let's go crazy. Let's go full spirograph. Go 30. Okay, so we're in this full spirograph mode. I've got it centered on my grid. I've already aligned it. I can then go up here to repeat, and then I hit the word release. Oh, undo, sorry, not release. Release is when you want to get out of it. Apologies. Object, expand. Once I hit expand, I can choose it's the object, fill, or you can do just the object or just the fill. And I'm going to say, okay. And now it's expanded into shapes. Now these are all shapes that I can then work with. And so, for example, I could now select everything, grab my live paint tool again, right? And my zoom is in the way. Go back to my live paint tool, choose, oh my gosh, get these things out of the way. There we go. Choose my grid that I'm using and start using, painting it because it's all shapes now, right? So I can now kind of play with it. So anyway, so that's a way to add some fun. That used to be done a much more complicated way. And so I'm happy to share, we now have this at our disposal. I'm going to move this off to the side and show you the other features that same tool has. So I'm going to stay, just for simplicity's sake, using a circle to show you this. So here's the circle, object, repeat. I can create a grid. And I want you to see how super easy this is. I'm going to grab my selection tools. Oopsie. So I can move this onto my grid. I'm going to move this grid onto my grid, starting up here at the top. And look at this. I can scale to the size of it, right? So let's say I get it so it's kind of aligning into my grid, the circle, the way I want it. So I'm going to just scoot it on there. So it's that upper left-hand one is connecting. Then I can slide this slider bar over, slide this down, right? And, oops, select. I can adjust this slider bar to have them overlap, right? Or adjust the spacing. And I can adjust this slider bar to do this side, right? How cool is this tool, you guys? Look at that, right? Have you guys used this before? Look at this. This is such a cool tool. So here I can add all of these circles. I mean, I can go as crazy as I want building on here. Look at that. In seconds. It's not like having to repeat and use transform repeat. It's like within seconds. So this is like such a time saver when you want to do something on a grid. So here's an example of taking any shape and adding it to your grid, playing with the overlap, again, same thing. You would go, once you have it where you want it, you would go object, expand, and you don't forget this step. You have to do the expand. So then it becomes a shapes, so that we can then use our live shape tool and our shape builder tool to start building our shapes out of it. So yeah, so there it is. So that's the grid tool. And then lastly, and I'm going to just move this guy off to the side and show you, oops, doesn't want to go off to the side. There we go. And then the last one, I'm going to stick with my circle. Actually, for this one, I'm going to use a star because I think it actually will be easier to show you with a shape like a star. I'm gonna hold my shift key down to get my star sitting up nice and pretty. So there's my star. And I'm going to go into object, repeat, mirror, and you can see anything I do to my star is being mirrored right next to it. So depending on what you want to do, you can kind of have this, have an element that's being perfectly mirrored at the same time. So that can be kind of a useful tool depending on, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. You can then also adjust how the mirroring is happening. Are they touching? Are they distorting? You know, what are you having that mirror do? Again, you have these kind of very visible, you can adjust the spacing, how much space is between each object. It's just so intuitive how these tools work. I really appreciate that. Okay, so that's the mirror tool. And again, once you have it where you want it, object, repeat, options, mirror. You can also use the options and put that in there as well, what you want to do. Exit isolation mode, and then we're back. And there's my two objects that are perfectly aligned, you know, however I design them. Okay, so that is the repeat tool, 3 different ways to use it to add to your designs that you're building on top of your grids. So these are all things I'm building on top of a fairly simple grid because I know I'm going to add more complex elements. So for those of you who have fairly simple grids, these are some of the things you can do to customize them and add your designs to them. Now remember, you're using that underlying grid to make your designs connect to and use those intersections of that underlying grid to build this new design on. Things are aligning to that underlying grid. Okay.